Let's talk with Turquoise. Turquoise has been waiting for a little bit, and she is a repeat caller, I believe. Turquoise, welcome back to the show.
Hello. I would like to say this has to be the most fascinating episode that I've heard in a while. This,
well, there you go, Annette.
Yay!
Yeah, awesome. And if Sam is still listening, I wish them good luck. You have my condolences.
Yeah,
but I wish
Sam is gonna have something to do this Christmas for sure. I hope they call back and let us know how it goes. I know you're calling back. We had a conversation before. Do you want to kind of briefly go over what your last conversation with us was about, so the audience is all caught up with us?
Sure. Yeah, I called in last about 2 weeks ago because I've just been confused about the concept of non-binary genders, because essentially the mindset that I've always grew up with was that it doesn't matter what you are biologically speaking or like physically what you are. It should not define what your interests, personality, affectations, anything you want to put under that list. And you shouldn't put any sort of expectations as to what a boy or a girl is. So the concept of having this third, and what I always thought was that gender should just be a synonym for sex. Which had me confused on why some people are coming up with this idea of a non-binary gender, or rather a gender that is not in between male or not male or female. I listened over the last conversation, and my girlfriend listened to the call as well, and we talked about this after. And she and I were just talking about different aspects of ourselves that we considered either masculine or feminine, or maybe neither. And we were talking about how frustrated we've often been with expectations that have been placed on us based on our sex. And I think I realized that's basically what my problem stemmed from. What I've been afraid of with the concept of non-binary genders is that I felt like it was essentially saying that girls who do not act what is quote unquote feminine enough aren't girls, and boys who don't act quote unquote masculine enough aren't considered boys, which would make people feel like they have to fit some sort of standard that they really don't have to fit. It's because I've always felt like, or at least in my experience with gender, is that it was oppressive. It's kind of like what Sam was mentioning on the last call. He mentioned that that part where I believe is one of his family members, one of their family members, I forgot, was that she had a boyfriend who wore pink socks, and his grandmother thought it was the end of the world or something. Oh my God, right. Men can't wear pink socks.
Right, exactly.
Who thought of this idea?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it was Chelsea in that previous call. They mentioned that something about the difference between gender roles and gender identity that kind of had this light in my head that kind of straightened things out for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have, and I think it's going to vary a little bit based on the person you're talking to. I know my experience as a non-binary person is extremely different than someone else's, right? And with that comes my own take. But this is me trying to explain my experience. So before we jump into anything else, I just want to make sure that we understand that. So here's where I come down on this. And I'm going to use a recent event to kind of highlight the difference here. There are expectations that are placed on gendered people to act in accordance with that gender. Absolutely. And a lot of them are ridiculous. Men cannot wear pink socks is ridiculous. For a very long time, the actor now known as Elliot Page identified publicly as a lesbian woman. And they were treated as such, and they were given a platform, they were given fame, they were a role model for a certain LGBTQ community, or a subsection of that community. And that was how people interacted with them. And this week, they came out as trans non-binary. Their pronouns are he, them. And they changed their name to Elliot. And that is something that they needed. They were already defying a lot of the stereotypes that came with being perceived as a woman. They were interested in other women. They would, dress super butch sometimes. They had this cool, androgynous thing going on, right? And there were all of these things that they were doing that was just not quite what that gender was expected. But it was also, hold on, got myself wrapped up in a loop here. They were defying gender expectations as a lesbian woman, as somebody perceived as that. That was not enough for them, clearly. That was not who they were. They felt the need to embrace who they were as a trans masculine non-binary person. Now, what that means for them, I can't say. Whether or not they suffer from dysphoria, I can't say. Whether or not it's going to be difficult for them to reprise roles like Vanya in Umbrella Academy and portray a cis woman as a trans masc non-binary person, I don't know. It might be difficult. It might not. I personally don't have a lot of dysphoria, but I know other non-binary people who really, really do. And so that's the key difference there, right? Nobody is saying that because you defy certain gender norms, you have to identify in any way. And there are always going to be people who continue to identify as cis and just, break some of those norms, some of those expectations. And then there are going to be other people for whom that's not enough, for whom that is not accurate to who they are. And that might be the first, little light bulb that, oh, maybe it's not just that I don't like certain elements of what is expected of this gender. I am not this gender at all. So it's complicated and certainly can't be boiled down to ones and zeros, at least not yet. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense. That I think that puts a really good point to it, because I remember last time we spoke, you gave me the ice cream analogy. And I think a question that came up in my head was, like, for example, let's say you got chocolate ice cream and everybody perceives chocolate ice cream to have 75% cacao or more in it. And then suddenly you have this scoop of ice cream that is only 60% cacao or 50% cacao. It still you could say, some people would say, you could probably say, oh, it still looks or tastes like chocolate ice cream, but does it really follow the recipe? Or do we have to consider this part of the recipe? Or do we have to, what level of usefulness does this recipe have now? So I think that was something that really touched upon it based on what type of expectations other people have based on gender.
I really like that, actually, that extrapolation of the ice cream analogy, saying, okay, well, currently we have this understanding of what comprises a batch of chocolate ice cream. This is the percentage. That's cool. What happens when one percentage gets knocked off, right? What if it's only 74% cacao, right? And then it's kind of a ship of Theseus issue as well there, where it's like, how much do you take away before something is completely different? And is it a single percentage point that is differentiating one thing from another? And here's where we get into, again, pragmatics and semantics and linguistic philosophy, which I absolutely love, because ultimately, a lot of this just comes down to the fact that we don't have a very precise language. We use words in weird ways that overgeneralize about a lot of things, and it's useful because we can have conversations in a meaningful way. We're not like the ants that spend 5 hours saying good morning. But at the same time, that leaves us open to questions like certain paradoxes, right? Or the ship of Theseus, and this concept of, oh, a thing can only be a thing for as long as it fits in this specific definition, and then it has to be something else. Another option would be to expand the definition, right? And so we're faced with different areas of ways to approach this. But the bottom line here is that we should be respecting individual people, right? Whether that means creating new words or making room in old words, or just specifying words and adding them together in new ways to highlight the differences that make us all individuals. The point is to be open and excited to meet someone who's different than you.
Yeah, and serving a little bit of a function so that we have a word that means white chocolate that is not the same as the words for dark chocolate, so that we don't have to sit here and say, well, she's chocolate, but she's just like kind of chocolate. She's only 50% chocolate. And, we used to kind of do that with words like tomboy and some of these other ideas. And we don't have to, we can add to our language. We can have more flavors and have more discrete categories as just a better way of describing and understanding these things. Now, I don't want to get too far afield from all of this as we're kind of wrapping it up, but I think another really important cannonball to throw into this conversation and really mix things up is just to remember that our sex is not binary either, that we are not genetically speaking either male or female in that very, very simple either or kind of way. And so when we're talking about our gender as being perhaps related to our sex or perhaps related to our genetic identity, that there's actually a lot more to our sex and that our gender is going to reflect that as well.
When you say that, do you also? Are you saying that because there are also people who are intersex? Because I remember that I forgot to even mention that on my last call.
Intersex is certainly a aspect of this conversation. We've actually covered this a lot on the show, and I want to be mindful of our time tonight, but I will definitely put in the show notes to this episode a piece that I've written just sort of explaining how sex is not binary, that it is bimodal, and that our genetic heritage is a lot more complicated than just XX or XY.
You wouldn't happen to be with Valence Counseling, would you?
Yes, that is my handle.
Okay. Okay. I think you left an article in the comments of the last conversation that we had. But
yeah,
okay.
That may be something
anyway,
to take a look at. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if I could ask one last thing before I go, I remember Chelsea. I don't know if Chelsea was serious when they said that they wanted to talk to me. I don't know if there's a way I would be able to get into contact with them. Does Secular Sexuality have an email or something that I can send something to?
Well, we do have an email, but that just goes to me and Christy. A better way to probably get in touch with other people who have been on the show is to get involved in either our Discord or the Facebook group, because most of the conversations that happen about the show, either with guests or with people who have been listening in, happen there. So ACA Discord is the place to go for that, or our Facebook group.
Okay, great. Thank you.
For sure. Thanks for calling in again, Turquoise.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a good night, and thanks. And by the way, I want to thank you very much for your patience last time when I called. I listened to get on the call, and I did not realize just how insufferable my stutter was. So
oh no, I didn't even notice it.
It's a stressful situation. Yeah, I appreciate you being brave enough to call in and talk about some difficult things. So thank you.
Yeah.